The red giant star, known on the charts only as Sector 49 Alpha, was dying. It was not going quietly. It convulsed in slow tectonic spasms of light and radiation, painting the void in bruised shades of crimson and gangrenous purple. Orbiting this celestial corpse was a facility that did not officially exist. It was a black site, a jagged hunk of rot-resistant alloy and misery clinging to the gravity well like a tick on a dying dog. Cade watched the station rotate on his main view screen. He sat in the cockpit of the Iron Lung, a ship that lived up to its name by wheezing through every atmospheric cycler. He was 30 years old, though the cosmic radiation and the cheap whiskey made him look 40. He had the kind of face that was handsome in a way that suggested bad decisions. A sharp jawline softened by stubble, eyes the color of dirty ice, and a mouth that rested naturally in a cynical line. He checked the contract again. 100,000 credits. Half up front, half upon delivery. The manifest listed the cargo simply as asset X-ray, weaponry, dangerous tech, illegal bioenhancements. Cade did not care. He was a smuggler, not a priest. If the credits cleared, he would haul a crate of plague rats to a nursery. Well, maybe not that, but close enough. Approach vector locked. The ship's computer droned. The voice synthesizer was broken, making the AI sound like it was gargling gravel. Stealth masking at 70%. Thermal buildup is critical in 5 minutes. Keep your shirt on, Cade muttered, his fingers dancing over the tactile switches of the control yoke. Just get me to the airlock before the picket drones wake up. The Iron Lung drifted like a piece of debris, engines cold, using nothing but maneuvering thrusters to align with the station's cargo bay. The silence of space was a lie. Inside the cockpit, it was a cacophony of groaning metal and the rhythmic thumping of the cooling pumps. Cade matched the station's rotation. The docking clamps engaged with a shudder that rattled his teeth. He wasted no time. He grabbed his pulse rifle, checked the charge on his magnetic boots, and sealed his helmet. The airlock cycled with a hiss of decontamination gas. The interior of the prison smelled of ozone and stale fear. It was dark, lit only by the emergency strobes that pulsed in time with the dying star outside. Cade moved with the practiced ease of a man who had spent half his life breaking into places he was not welcome. He bypassed 2 security doors with a logic spike, frying the locking mechanisms before the alarms could trigger. He had 10 minutes before the shift change. 10 minutes to grab the weapon and vanish. The map on his heads-up display led him deep into the bowels of the station, past cells that were essentially coffins built into the bulkheads. He ignored the muffled sounds coming from behind the heavy blast doors. He was here for the vault. He reached the target sector. It was not a storage locker. It was a containment lab. Cade frowned behind his visor. What kind of weapon needs life support? He whispered to himself. He rigged a shaped charge to the door, stepped back, and detonated it. The explosion was a dull thump in the pressurized corridor, instantly swallowed by the station's dampeners. The door groaned and fell inward. Smoke drifted in the low gravity. Cade stepped through, rifle raised, scanning for automated turrets. There were none. The room was circular, lined with banks of humming servers and monitoring equipment. In the center of the room, suspended in a cylinder of translucent amber fluid, was the asset. Cade lowered his rifle, his breath hitched in his throat. It was not a gun, it was not a virus, and it was a woman. She was suspended in the fluid, naked, her skin a shimmering, iridescent silver that seemed to catch the low light and amplify it. She was tall, slender but muscular, with hair like spun mercury floating in the liquid suspension. Wires and tubes snaked into her spine, her temples, and her wrists. But the most arresting feature was the pair of heavy, glowing cuffs locked around her forearms and ankles. They pulsed with a sickly green light, wired directly into the base of her skull. Neural shackles, the kind that did not just restrain the body but locked the mind in a chemically induced fugue state. "Son of a bitch," Cade breathed. "A slave run. They sent me on a slave run." He stepped closer to the tank. The woman's eyes were closed. She looked peaceful, in the way a corpse looked peaceful. He tapped the glass. "Hey," he said, his voice amplified by his helmet speakers. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. He looked at the console nearby. The readings were gibberish to him, high-level xenobiology syntax. But the vitals were clear. She was alive, barely. Her brain activity was being suppressed by the cuffs. Cade swore. He should leave. He should turn around, walk back to his ship, and jump to the next system. Smuggling weapons was one thing. Trafficking sentient beings was a line he tried not to cross, mostly because the sentences were shorter for guns. But the money, 100,000 credits. He was in debt to people who removed fingers as interest payments. He growled and typed a command into the console to drain the tank. The amber fluid hissed as it receded. The woman slumped, caught by the harness straps. The glass cylinder hissed open. Cade caught her before she hit the deck. She was heavy, dense with muscle and bone, her skin cool to the touch even through his gloves. Her eyes snapped open. They were violet, lacking pupils, like staring into the heart of a nebula. They were terrified. She gasped, a wet, ragged sound, and thrashed against him. The neural cuffs flared, sending a visible shockwave of electricity through her body. She arched her back, screaming a silent scream, her vocal cords seized by the spasm. "Easy," Cade shouted, holding her steady. "I am not with them. I am getting you out." She went limp as the shock faded, trembling violently. She looked up at him, her vision unfocused. She tried to speak, but only a croak came out. She swallowed, forced air into her lungs, and tried again. "Kill me," she whispered. The request was so stark, so devoid of drama that it froze Cade in place. "What?" "Kill me," she rasped, her violet eyes boring into his visor. "Or get me out. Do not let them put me back under." Something in Cade's chest, a piece of him he thought had calcified years ago, cracked. He looked at the glowing cuffs digging into her silver flesh. He looked at the wires trailing from her spine. "Hold on," Cade said. He slung his rifle and scooped her up. She was taller than him, but the station's gravity was set low. He ran. The alarms finally decided to wake up. Sirens began to wail, a mournful mechanical screeching that echoed through the corridors. Red lights began to spin. "We have company," Cade grunted. He sprinted back the way he came, the silver woman draped over his shoulder. She was not dead weight. She was tense, every muscle coiled, her head swiveling to watch the rear. "3 guards," she whispered, her voice gaining strength. "Behind us, 50 meters. Cade did not ask how she knew. He spun around, dropped to one knee, and fired 3 bursts of plasma down the corridor. 3 armored figures rounded the corner and crumpled as the superheated bolts melted through their chest plates. "Good eyes," Cade said, standing up and resuming his run. They hit the airlock. Cade slammed the cycle button. The door hissed shut just as a heavy laser cutter began to carve through the metal from the other side. "Welcome aboard the Iron Lung," Cade said, dumping her onto the co-pilot's crash couch. "Buckle up. It is going to get bumpy." He vaulted into the pilot's seat and slammed the throttle forward before the docking clamps had fully disengaged. The ship screamed as metal sheared against metal. The Iron Lung tore away from the station, trailing sparks and debris. "Defensive turrets active," the computer gargled. Explosions blossomed around them as the station opened fire. Cade threw the ship into a corkscrew spin, ignoring the G-forces that pressed him into his seat. Beside him, the woman did not scream. She stared at the view screen, her expression unreadable, her hands gripping the armrest so hard the metal groaned. "Jump, drive, charging!" Cade yelled over the roar of the engines. 30 seconds! A beam of coherent light slashed past the cockpit, searing the shields. 20 seconds. "They are targeting the engines," the woman said. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly so. "Roll left, 45 degrees. Cade didn't argue. He rolled left. A microsecond later, a torpedo streak occupied the space they had just vacated. 10 seconds. The stars outside began to stretch into lines of light. The red giant faded into a blur. "Jump!" The universe twisted inside out. The roar of combat was replaced by the eerie, silent hum of hyperspace. Cade slumped in his seat, exhaling a breath he felt like he had been holding for an hour. He spun the chair around. "All right," he said, flipping his visor up. "That was close. Now, do you mind telling me what exactly—" He stopped. The woman was standing. She had unbuckled herself. She stood in the center of the cramped cockpit, naked, silver, and imposing. The neural cuffs still glowed on her wrists, but she held herself with the posture of a queen addressing a peasant. "I require access to the navigation computer," she said. It was not a request. Cade blinked. "Excuse me?" "You are a mercenary," she stated. Her accent was strange, lilting and musical but crisp. "You have extracted me. Now I am commandeering this vessel." Cade laughed. He couldn't help it. "Lady, you are naked. You have got glowing jewelry welded to your nervous system, and you are on my ship. Sit down before you fall down." Her eyes narrowed. "I am Saraxa of House Valdari. I will not sit down." She moved toward the console. "Hey!" Cade stood up, stepping in her path. "Do not touch that. Those cuffs. I will disable them." She snapped. She reached out, placing her hand on the interface panel. "I can override the encryption if I link directly to your core." "Do not do it," Cade warned. "That tech is proprietary black market slang. If you try to hack it with a neural link, it will fry your brain." She ignored him. The wires in her neck flared with blue light. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind to the ship's primitive computer. For a second, the lights in the cockpit flickered. The engine hum pitch changed. Then, Saraxa screamed. It was a sound of pure agony. The green light on her cuffs turned a violent red. Arcs of electricity lashed out from her wrists, scorching the console and throwing her backward. She hit the deck hard, convulsing. "Damn it!" Cade scrambled to her side. She was thrashing, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. The feedback loop was cooking her nervous system. Cade grabbed a medical suppression stick from his belt kit, a standard item for smugglers who dealt with unruly cargo, and jammed it into her neck. The drug hit her system instantly. She arched once, gasped, and then went limp, her eyes rolling back into her head. The red light on the cuffs faded back to a dull, pulsing green. Cade knelt there, breathing hard, looking down at her. She looked smaller now, curled on the dirty metal grating of the deck. "Told you," he muttered, though there was no triumph in it. He picked her up again, carrying her out of the cockpit and into the small medical bay at the rear of the ship. It was little more than a closet with a bio-bed and an auto-dock, but it was clean. He laid her down. The bio-bed hummed, scanning her. Subject, Valdari species, female. Injuries, severe neural trauma, malnutrition, muscle atrophy. Alert, foreign technology detected attached to skeleton. Cade sighed and rubbed his face. Computer, synthesize a nutrient drip and a nerve-calming agent, and get me the laser scalpel. He spent the next 6 hours working. He couldn't remove the cuffs, they were fused to her bone, and trying to cut them out would kill her without a full surgical suite. But he could dampen them. He jury-rigged a signal blocker using spare parts from a comms relay, welding it carefully to the casing of the cuffs to stop them from receiving remote kill commands. He had to touch her to work. He had to move her limbs, lift her head, slide the diagnostic sensors over her silver skin. It was distracting, not just because she was beautiful, which she was in a terrifying alien way, but because of how her body reacted every time his fingers brushed her skin, even through his gloves. She twitched. A ripple of motion would start at the point of contact and shudder through her. He peeled off his gloves to handle the delicate wiring of the jammer. His bare finger grazed her shoulder. She gasped in her sleep, her back arched off the bed, her skin flushing a deep, vibrant violet where he had touched her. Cade pulled his hand back as if he had been burned. Computer, what is that? Analysis. Subject possesses extensive genetic modification. Epidermal sensors are enhanced by 300%. Tactile hypersensitivity. Purpose, unknown. Hypothesis, conditioning or pleasure engineering. Cade felt a knot of nausea in his stomach. Pleasure engineering. They had built her to feel everything, every touch, every pain, every pleasure magnified 3 times over. And then they had locked her in a prison cell. He finished his work with grim efficiency. He covered her with a thermal blanket, turned down the lights, and went to the galley to drink something that tasted like fuel solvent. She woke up 12 hours later. Cade was sitting in the chair opposite the bio-bed, cleaning his rifle. He watched her stir. She didn't thrash this time. She opened her eyes, took a deep breath, and assessed her surroundings. You are still alive, Cade said. That is a plus. Saraxa sat up slowly. She looked at the blanket covering her, then at the clumsy metal box Cade had welded to her cuffs. She ran a finger over it. You blocked the receiver, she said. Her voice was hoarse. Yeah. Saves your head from exploding if they try to detonate you remotely. You have some skill with electronics. For a human, Cade snorted. You are welcome. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, clutching the blanket to her chest. The imperious arrogance was still there, but it was brittle now. Where are we? Deep space, heading toward the rim. I figured you wouldn't want to stick around the core systems. You figured correctly. She looked him in the eye. Why did you help me? You were sent to retrieve a weapon. I do not trade in people, Cade said. I have low standards, princess, but I have them. Princess, she repeated, tasting the word. You know who I am. I know your name is Saraxa. I know you are House Valdari. That is enough to know I am in deep trouble. Your family runs half the sector. They do not run it, she said bitterly. They consume it, and they imprisoned me because I refused to help them consume the rest. By using you as a battery? By using me as a processor, she corrected. My mind, it was designed to interface with the old networks, the ancestral AIs. My father wanted to use my neural pathways to override the defense grids of the rival systems. He wanted to turn me into a key that would unlock a galactic genocide. She shuddered, and the blanket slipped slightly. Cade looked away, giving her privacy. So, Cade said, focusing on his rifle. Civil war. It is coming, she said. My escape will trigger it. My father cannot let me live, but he cannot destroy me without losing the access code stored in my DNA. He will burn 1,000 worlds to find me. Great, Cade said dryly. Just great. And here I was hoping for a quiet week. Saraxa looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the grease on his shirt, the way his hands were steady despite the situation. What is your name? Human. Cade. Cade. She tested the name. I am hungry. Cade. He stood up. I have protein bars and dehydrated water, 5-star dining. She actually smiled. It was a small, fleeting thing, but it transformed her face. I have eaten worse. In the black site, they fed us nutrient paste through a tube. He brought her food. She ate with a voracious, unladylike intensity that made him smirk. They talked as the ship hummed through the void. They argued about the navigation route. She wanted to go to a specific set of coordinates, but he refused to fly blindly into uncharted space. They bickered about the temperature of the cabin. It was strange. They should have been enemies, or at least distant strangers. But the confinement of the small ship forced a proximity that accelerated everything. Later, he had to check the healing on her wrists. I need to see the skin underneath the cuffs, he said. Saraxa hesitated, then held out her arms. She sat on the edge of the bio-bed, the blanket wrapped around her waist, leaving her upper body exposed. Her silver skin glowed softly in the dim light. Cade moved closer. He tried to be clinical. He reached out to lift the heavy metal cuff slightly to check for infection. His knuckles brushed the inside of her wrist. Saraxa gasped, her head falling back, her eyes fluttering shut, her breath hitched, turning into a low, involuntary sound that was unmistakably aroused. Cade froze. Did I hurt you? No, she breathed. Her voice was thick. The sensitivity, it is overwhelming. When you touch me, it feels like... She trailed off, biting her lip. Cade stared at her. He could see the pulse hammering in her throat. He could see the way her nipples had hardened against the cool air. The air in the room suddenly felt very heavy, charged with static. He was a man who had spent a lot of time alone. He was not immune to this. I can wear thicker gloves, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Saraxa opened her eyes. The violet irises were dark. She leaned forward just an inch. Do you want to? The question hung there. It was dangerous. It was insane. She was a fugitive alien princess with a kill switch in her head. He was a broke smuggler. I want to get paid, Cade lied, stepping back. And I want to stay alive. Touching you seems like a bad way to do both. Saraxa watched him retreat, a complex expression on her face. Was it a disappointment or relief? You are a strange man, Cade, she murmured. I am a smart man, he countered. Get some sleep. I will take the first watch. He fled the med bay, his heart hammering against his ribs. He sat in the cockpit, staring at the stars, trying to calm his blood. Beep. The communications console lit up. It was a general broadcast, encrypted on the bounty hunter frequency. Cade had a decoder installed. It was standard survival gear. He opened the channel. A holographic projection flickered to life above the dashboard. It was a rotation of a face. High cheekbones, silver skin, violet eyes. Wanted, dead or alive. Target, Saraxa of Valdari. Accomplice, human male. Pilot of light freighter class. Unregistered. Crimes, high treason, theft of state property, terrorism. Bounty, 5 million credits. Cade stared at the number. 5 million. 5 million. He whispered. That wasn't a bounty. That was a declaration of war. Every hunter, mercenary, and pirate from the core to the rim would be looking for them. His ship, his face, they were already burned. He looked back toward the closed door of the medical bay. He could turn her in. He could drug her, fly to the nearest outpost and collect enough money to buy his own moon. He could walk away. He thought about the scars on her wrists. He thought about the whisper, "Kill me," or "Get me out." He thought about the way she had looked at him when he offered her a protein bar, like it was a feast. 5 million, Cade said again. He reached out and deleted the message. He punched in new coordinates, heading away from the trade routes, toward the lawless zones. "Well, Princess," he said to the empty cockpit, "looks like we are taking the scenic route." The iron lung flared its thrusters and banked hard into the dark, carrying the two most wanted beings in the galaxy into the unknown. The moon of Oakhaven was a blister on the dark skin of the sector, a neutral colony clinging to an asteroid that tumbled lazily through the void. It was a place where ships went to die and smugglers went to drink. The atmosphere was thin, smelling of recycled sulfur and cheap ozone. But to Cade, it smelled like safety, or at least the closest thing to it. The iron lung set down on a landing pad that was more rust than metal. Steam hissed from the cooling vents, shrouding the ship in a thick, artificial fog. Inside the cockpit, Cade flipped the kill switches, silencing the engines. The silence that followed was heavy. He looked at Saraxa. She was wearing one of his spare flight suits, the sleeves rolled up 3 times to accommodate her slender arms, the heavy canvas swallowing her regal frame. It should have looked ridiculous. Instead, she made the grease-stained uniform look like high fashion. She sat with her back straight, her violet eyes scanning the desolate landing bay outside the viewport. "This is your sanctuary?" she asked, her voice flat. "It looks like a graveyard." "It is a clinic," Cade corrected, unbuckling his harness. "And the woman running it is the best biomechanic this side of the core. If anyone can get that tracker out of your head without turning you into a vegetable, it is Bax." Saraxa raised an eyebrow, a silver arch against her shimmering forehead. "Bax, a female." "Don't start," Cade muttered, grabbing his medkit. "She is an old friend." "I am learning that friend in your vocabulary usually implies a history of bad decisions and shared fluids." Saraxa noted coldly. Cade ignored her, popped the airlock, and led her down the ramp. The gravity here was heavier than on the ship, and he saw Saraxa stumble slightly, her muscles still recovering from the atrophy of the prison cell. He reached out to steady her, his hand gripping her elbow. Through the fabric of the flight suit, he felt her stiffen, that engineered hypersensitivity reacting even to a casual touch. She did not pull away, but she did not lean into him either. They moved through the labyrinthine alleys of the colony, avoiding the main thoroughfares. Cade navigated by memory, leading them to a blast door marked with a faded medical caduceus spray-painted in red. He hammered a rhythm on the metal. A slot slid open. A pair of tired, cynical eyes peered out. "You owe me money, Cade," a voice rasped. "I have money," Cade lied smoothly. "And I have a bottle of distinctively non-toxic whiskey." The door groaned open. Bax stood there, wiping her hands on a bloodied apron. She was short, muscular, with cybernetic lenses replacing both eyes, giving her a perpetual, zooming stare. She looked Cade up and down, then shifted her gaze to the tall, silver woman looming behind him. Bax let out a low whistle. "Well, you finally upgraded from cargo crates to supermodels. She is glowing, Cade, literally glowing." "She needs a scan," Cade said, pushing past her into the clinic. "And discretion. A lot of discretion." The clinic was a chaos of scavenged medical tech and half-disassembled droids. Bax cleared a table, sweeping a pile of prosthetic limbs onto the floor with a clatter. "Sit," Bax commanded. Saraxa hesitated, glancing at Cade. He nodded. She sat. So, Bax said, pulling a scanner from the ceiling mount. Where did you find her, or did you steal her? She is a passenger, Cade said. He stole me, Saraxa said at the same time. Bax laughed, a dry, hacking sound. I like her. She has your talent for honesty, which is to say, none at all. She leaned in close to Saraxa, her cyber eyes whirring as they adjusted focus. You and Cade, huh? Let me guess. He charmed you with that crooked smile, promised you the stars, and then you found out he lives off protein paste and anxiety. We are not together, Saraxa said, her voice icy. He is merely my transport. Right, Bax murmured, running the scanner over Saraxa's neck. And I am the Queen of Nebula 9. Hold still. This might sting. As the scanner hummed, the tension in the room thickened. Saraxa watched Bax with predatory suspicion. Every time Bax's hand brushed Cade's arm, a familiar lingering touch that spoke of late nights and past intimacy, Saraxa's jaw tightened. You seem very comfortable with him, Saraxa observed, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Bax smirked, glancing at Cade. We had our moments. Cade is good at two things, flying fast and leaving faster. Do not get attached, sweetheart. He is a bad investment. I am not investing, Saraxa snapped. I am utilizing it. Found it, Bax interrupted, her tone dropping the banter. She pulled the scanner back, her expression grave. She tapped a sequence into a holographic display, and a 3D rendering of Saraxa's nervous system floated in the air. It was a mess of red warning lights. It is not a chip, Cade said, stepping closer. I thought it was in the cuffs. The cuffs were just the receiver, Bax said, pointing to the bloodstream. The tracker is biological. It is in her blood, replicating nanites, bonded to her neural DNA. Look at the structure. Cade squinted at the hologram. The microscopic machines were shaped like thorns, hooked into her white blood cells. Can you flush them? Cade asked. If I flush them, I flush her bone marrow, Bax said. This isn't just a tracking device, Cade. It is a data archive. These things are carrying a payload, massive encryption, old code, pre-war stuff. Saraxa went pale. Her silver skin lost its luster, turning a dull gray. The ancestral memory, she whispered. Bax looked at her. What? The data, Saraxa said, her voice trembling. It is not just coordinates, it is him. Suddenly, Saraxa's eyes rolled back. Her body went rigid on the table. The lights in the clinic flickered and died, then surged with blinding intensity. She is seizing, Bax shouted, reaching for a sedative. No, Cade yelled, grabbing Bax's wrist. Wait, look at the monitor. The brain activity readout wasn't showing a seizure. It was showing a conversation. Flashback. The room was white, blinding, sterile white. There were no corners, only smooth curves that offered no hiding place. Saraxa was 6 years old. She was naked, shivering on a cold metal slab. But she was not crying. Princesses of Valdari did not cry. They endured. Her father stood over her. He was tall, his augmentation ports glittering like jewels in his flesh. He did not look at her with love. He looked at her like an architect looks at a blueprint. The vessel is ready. A scientist in a heavy robe intoned, the genetic bonding is complete. Upload it, her father commanded. A needle, thick and cruel, descended from the ceiling. It pierced the base of her skull. Pain, white-hot and absolute, shattered her reality. But within the pain there was a voice. It was vast, ancient, and cold, that tasted of rust and dead stars. I am the silent king. I am the algorithm of control. The voice did not speak to her ears. It rewrote her synapses. It poured oceans of data into her small, fragile mind. Tactical schematics, blackmail files on every governor in the sector, codes to deactivate planetary shields, and deeper, darker things, the blueprints for a weaponized artificial intelligence that had been banned for 1,000 years. "You are not a child," her father's voice echoed, distant and distorted. "You are a vault. You will carry the legacy of our dominance in your blood. You will speak only when spoken to. You will feel only what we allow you to feel." The nanites flooded her veins, turning her blood into a liquid hard drive. She felt her own identity, her own small desires, being pushed into a corner of her mind, walled off by layers of encryption. "One day," her father whispered, leaning close, "you will be the key that enslaves the galaxy. Until then, sleep." "Saraxa!" Cade's voice was a slap, pulling her back from the abyss. Saraxa gasped, sitting bolt upright. She was sweating, her silver sweat shimmering on her skin. The clinic was dark, lit only by the emergency red lighting. "You were gone," Cade said. He was holding her shoulders, his grip tight. "For 2 minutes, you were just gone." Saraxa looked at him, then at Bax, who was staring at her with a mixture of awe and horror. "It is not just a tracker," Saraxa said, her voice hollow. "I am the weapon, the data inside me. It is the source code for an AI god my ancestors worshipped. If my father unlocks it, he can override every automated defense system in the galaxy. He can turn every ship, every drone, every life support system against its users." Bax swore softly. "And I thought I had baggage. Honey, you are a walking apocalypse." "We have to get it out," Cade said. He looked at Bax. "Can we destroy it? Burn it out of her blood?" "Maybe," Bax said, rubbing her chin. "I could run a high-radiation dialysis. It would cook the nanites. But it would likely scour her mind, too. She would lose her memory, maybe her personality. She would be a blank slate." "Do it," Cade said immediately. "Better a blank slate than a slave to a dead god." "No!" Saraxa slid off the table, her legs shaking. She pushed Cade away. "Saraxa, listen to me," Cade pleaded. "That thing in your head, it is a bomb. If we leave it there, they will come for you. They will never stop coming." "Let them come," Saraxa shouted. Her violet eyes blazed with a terrifying light. "Do you not understand? This data, it is power. My father put it there to use me. But if I can control it, if I can master the code—" "You want to use it?" Cade asked, incredulous. "I want to burn them," she hissed. "I want to take this weapon they forced into my blood and turn it against them. I want to see House Valdari crumble." "You are talking about revenge," Cade said. "Not survival. I am talking about justice." She turned away, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. She stopped in front of a polished metal cabinet, catching her own reflection. She stared at herself, the silver skin, the glowing veins, the borrowed flight suit. "Look at me," she whispered, her anger draining away into sudden crushing misery. "I am not a person. I am a hard drive in a pretty wrapper. I am the most useless royal in the galaxy. I cannot even pilot a ship without nearly killing myself. I am just baggage." She laughed, a brittle, breaking sound. "You should have left me in the tank, Cade. At least there, I was quiet." Cade stared at her. He saw the self-loathing eating her alive. He saw the way she trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of her own existence. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed her face between his hands. "Shut up," he growled, and he kissed her. It was meant to be a silencing tactic, a rough, quick action to shock her out of her spiral. But the moment his lips touched hers, the equation changed. Saraxa froze for a heartbeat. Then, she made a noise in her throat, a desperate, starving whimper, and surged against him. She didn't just kiss him back, she devoured him, her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him down. Her mouth was hot, tasting of salt and exotic enzymes. The hypersensitivity of her skin flared. Cade felt the heat radiating off her, burning through his clothes. The kiss deepened, becoming a battle for dominance, a clash of teeth and tongues. It was messy and urgent. It was the physical manifestation of 2 weeks of running, fighting, and nearly dying. For a moment, the clinic, the tracker, the bounty, it all vanished. There was only the taste of her, the electric hum of her body against his. Then, just as Cade's hand slid down to her waist, pulling her hips against his, she shoved him away. She stumbled back, chest heaving, her lips swollen and dark purple. Her eyes were wide, filled with panic. "No," she gasped. "No, I cannot." Cade stood there, breathing hard, his blood singing in his ears. "Saraxa, do not look at me like that," she pleaded, backing away until she hit the wall. "I cannot afford this. I cannot afford hope. Cade, hope is a weakness. It breaks the mind faster than any torture. If I start to want this, if I start to want you, I will hesitate. And if I hesitate, I die." "So you choose to be alone?" Cade asked, his voice rough. "I choose to be sharp," she said, wiping her mouth. "I choose to be a weapon." Before Cade could answer, the blast door of the clinic exploded. The concussion wave threw them all to the floor. Dust and debris filled the air. Through the ringing in his ears, Cade heard the distinctive thrum, thrum, thrum of heavy repeater rifles. "Bounty hunters!" Bax screamed, flipping a table over for cover. "Cade, you idiot! You led them right to my door!" "Sorry," Cade yelled, scrambling to his feet. He grabbed his pulse rifle from the floor. "Saraxa, move!" 3 armored figures stormed through the smoke. They weren't local thugs. These were professionals, Valdari House Guard. They wore sleek black armor and carried disruption staves designed to capture, not kill. "Target acquired," a synthesized voice boomed. "Secure the asset. Terminate the human." Blue energy bolts sizzled through the air. Bax returned fire with a heavy pistol, blowing the knee joint off the lead trooper. "Go!" Bax shouted. "Get out the back! I will hold them! I am not leaving you!" Cade yelled, firing a burst that sparked uselessly off the trooper's shields. "I have insurance!" Bax roared. She slammed a button on the wall, and a turret dropped from the ceiling, spinning up. "Go! Cade! Run!" Cade grabbed Saraxa's hand. "Come on!" They sprinted through the rear exit, bursting out into the dirty alleyway. The air was cold and bit at their lungs. They ran, boots slamming against the metal grating. Behind them, the sound of heavy combat echoed from the clinic. "They found us too fast," Saraxa panted, matching his pace. "The tracker. It is broadcasting. Then we have to move faster than the signal." Cade grunted. They reached the landing pad. The Iron Lung was surrounded. A squad of 4 troopers was setting up a perimeter around the ramp. "We cannot get through," Saraxa said, stopping behind a stack of fuel crates. Cade checked his rifle. "Watch me." He pulled a grenade from his belt, a flashbang he had lifted from the prison station. "Cover your eyes." He lobbed it. The explosion was a blinding white star. The troopers staggered, their helmet sensors overloaded. "Now!" Cade broke cover, firing from the hip. He wasn't aiming to kill, he was aiming for the hydraulic lines of the landing gear. Steam and hydraulic fluid sprayed out, creating chaos. He shoulder-checked a blinded trooper, knocking him off the pad, and sprinted up the ramp. Saraxa was right behind him. "Clear left," she shouted. A trooper Cade hadn't seen rose from behind a strut, leveling a sniper rifle at Saraxa's back. "No!" Cade pivoted. He didn't have time to fire. He threw himself across Syraxa's path just as the trooper pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt hit Cade in the side. It felt like being punched by a comet. The armor of his flight jacket vaporized. The impact lifted him off his feet and slammed him into the airlock bulkhead. He hit the deck hard, the world spinning into gray fuzz. "Cade!" Syraxa screamed. She didn't run for cover. She turned on the trooper. She didn't have a weapon. She didn't need one. She raised her hand, her eyes glowing with a terrifying, chaotic light. The trooper's rifle suddenly overheated. The power cell whined and detonated in his hands, blowing him backward off the platform. Syraxa grabbed Cade by the harness and dragged him into the airlock. She hit the seal button. As the door hissed shut, she practically threw him into the corridor. "Computer!" she shrieked. "Launch! Emergency override! Get us out of here!" The ship lurched. The docking clamps tore free. The iron lung shot up into the sky, leaving the gravity of the moon behind. In the corridor, Cade groaned, clutching his side. His hand came away wet and red. "You are shot," Syraxa said. She was hovering over him, her face pale, her hands shaking. "I noticed," Cade wheezed. "Armor took the worst of it. Just a flesh wound." It was more than a flesh wound. The plasma had cauterized part of the hit, but the edges were bleeding sluggishly, and the pain was a living thing, eating at his ribs. "Get me to the engine room," Cade gasped. "Medkit is empty. Need the biogel in the emergency locker." Syraxa helped him up. He leaned heavily on her. She was surprisingly strong, her frame deceptive. They stumbled through the ship, past the swaying bulkheads, down into the belly of the vessel. The engine room was warm, vibrating with the rhythmic thumping of the drive core. It smelled of oil and heat. It was dim, lit by the amber pulse of the reactor. Syraxa eased him down onto a crate. She ripped the biogel pack from the wall locker and tore Cade's shirt open. She froze. The burn was ugly, a jagged streak of angry red across his ribs. "You jumped in front of it," she whispered, applying the gel. Her fingers were trembling. "Why? You are a mercenary. You do not take bullets for cargo," Cade hissed as the cold gel hit the burn. "Bad habit," he gritted out. "Told you, I have low standards." He looked up at her. She was kneeling between his legs, her hands covered in the medicinal slime and his blood. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were wild. "You could have died," she said. Her voice cracked. "You stupid, reckless human. You could have died, and I would have been alone." "Is that what you are worried about?" Cade managed a weak grin. "Losing your ride?" "No!" Syraxa grabbed the lapels of his torn jacket and yanked him forward. The distance between them vanished. "I am worried because you are the only thing in this universe that does not look at me and see a weapon," she cried. "I am worried because when you touched me, I did not want to break your arm. I wanted you to never stop." She kissed him again. This time, there was no hesitation, no pulling away. It was desperate. It was the taste of survival. She kissed him like she was trying to breathe for him. Cade forgot the pain in his side. He reached up, his hands finding the nape of her neck, tangling in the silver strands of her hair. He pulled her closer. "Syraxa," he warned, breaking the kiss for a second. "If we do this, there is no going back." "Good," she breathed against his mouth. "I hate looking back." She straddled him in the crate, mindful of his wound but careless of everything else. Her hands roamed over his chest, exploring the rough texture of his skin, so different from her own smooth, metallic flesh. When she touched him, her body lit up. The bioluminescence under her skin flared in time with her heartbeat. Violet, indigo, electric blue. It was like holding a nebula. Cade groaned, his hands sliding down to her hips. The sensation for her must have been overwhelming, amplified 300%. Every stroke of his thumb against her side made her shudder and gasp. "Does it hurt?" he whispered, tracing the line of her spine. "Yes," she sobbed, tearing at the fasteners of her flight suit. "It hurts. It burns. Make it stop hurting. Make me feel something else." They came together in a frenzy of discarded clothes and tangled limbs. It wasn't graceful. It was clumsy and raw, driven by adrenaline and the terror of near death. It was the friction of two different species trying to find a common language in the dark. Cade buried his face in the crook of her neck, tasting the metallic tang of her skin. She wrapped her legs around him, anchoring herself, her nails digging into his shoulders. She cried out, a sound that was half pleasure, half rage, rage at her father, at the prison, at the universe that wanted to own her. In the dim, thrumming warmth of the engine room, amidst the smell of ozone and blood, they took solace in the only thing they truly owned: their bodies. It was furious. I was confused. It was an act of rebellion, as the ship drifted silently through the void, carrying them away from the burning moon. The galaxy seemed to shrink down to the size of the engine room. The political machinations, the ancient prophecies, the bounty hunters. It all faded into the background noise of their breath and the beating of their hearts. They lay together afterward, tangled on the floor on a bed of spare uniforms. Syraxa's skin was slowly dimming, the violet pulses fading to a soft, steady glow. Her head rested on Cade's uninjured shoulder. Cade stroked her arm, tracing the scars where the cuffs had been. He didn't speak. There were no words for this. They had crossed a line, and the map on the other side was blank. Syraxa shifted, pressing a kiss to the pulse point of his throat. "We are in trouble," she whispered into the dark. "Yeah." Cade agreed, staring up at the pipes and conduits of the ceiling. "Big trouble. They will kill us if they catch us now," she said. "Not just for what I know, but for this." "Let them try," Cade said. And for the first time in years, he meant it. He wasn't fighting for a paycheck anymore. He tightened his arm around her. Out of cruel space, alien princess and human fled into a universe that hated them. But in the silence of the engine room, for this one fleeting hour, the universe could not touch them. The cosmic reef was a graveyard of stars, a dense swirling nebula of ionized gas and debris located in the dead space between the spiral arms of the galaxy. It was a place where sensors went blind and ships vanished, their hulls crushed by shifting gravitational tides. It was also the perfect place to hide. Cade piloted the iron lung through the gloom, his hands sweating inside his flight gloves. The sensors were screaming, painting the cockpit in a wash of red warning lights that he did his best to ignore. Outside the viewport, jagged asteroids loomed like the teeth of some leviathan, illuminated by the bruised purple and sickly green light of the nebula. "There," Syraxa whispered. She was standing behind his chair, her hand resting on the headrest. Her grip was tight enough to crack the leather. Ahead of them, built into the hollowed-out carcass of a dreadnought from a war that ended 2 centuries ago, was the station. It was a patchwork monstrosity, welded together from scrap metal, asteroid rock, and stolen tech. It hung in the mist like a festering wound, bleeding light and radiation into the void. "Port Royal," Cade muttered. "Or whatever they are calling it this cycle. A hive of scum, villainy, and reasonably priced fuel cells." "It looks like a tumor," Syraxa noted, her violet eyes narrowing. "It is the only port within 5 parsecs that won't scan our hull or ask for ID. Beggars, choosers, and all that." Cade guided the ship into the docking bay. The clamps engaged with a shudder that groaned through the entire frame of the iron lung. The hiss of the airlock equalizing sounded like a heavy sigh. They were low on everything. Fuel, food, medical supplies. The biogel had healed the worst of Cade's plasma burn, leaving a shiny, puckered scar across his ribs. But he was still moving stiffly. Saraxa was worse. The neural blocker Cade had rigged was holding, but she was pale, her silver skin lacking its usual luster. She had headaches that she tried to hide, rubbing her temples when she thought he wasn't looking. "Stay close," Cade warned as they walked down the ramp. "And keep your hood up. These people sell their own mothers for spare parts. I can only imagine what they would trade an imperial princess for." Saraxa pulled the cowl of her heavy cloak lower, shadowing her face. "I am not a princess here, Cade. I am just another fugitive." She was wrong. The moment they stepped into the main concourse of the station, the atmosphere shifted. It was a chaotic bazaar, smelling of frying oil, unwashed bodies, and ozone. Alien species of every shape and size bartered for contraband. But as Cade and Saraxa moved through the crowd, heads turned. It wasn't just her height, or the way she moved with a liquid predatory grace that the heavy cloak couldn't fully conceal. It was a recognition that went deeper. A group of miners, their skin hardened by vacuum exposure, stopped their conversation and stared. An old woman selling hallucinogenic moss dropped her basket. The silence spread outward from them like a ripple in a pond. "Cade," Saraxa whispered, her voice tight. "They are looking at me." "Ignore them. Just keep walking." "No. You do not understand. They know." A tall, four-armed alien with the distinct facial ridge of a Valdari stepped into their path. He was missing an eye, the socket covered by a crude metal patch. He stared at Saraxa, then slowly, deliberately, dropped to one knee. "The silver ghost," the alien rasped. "The daughter of the chain." Saraxa froze. She stared at the kneeling figure, then at the others around him. One by one, the Valdari exiles in the crowd, and there were dozens of them, began to bow. It wasn't a bow of reverence. It was a bow of terrified submission. "Get up," Saraxa hissed, stepping back. "Do not do that." "We felt you," the one-eyed alien said, not rising. "When the chain broke, when the data screamed, we felt the echo in the blood." Cade grabbed Saraxa's arm. "We are leaving, now." He dragged her toward the lift that led to the upper levels, away from the crowd. Saraxa was trembling, her breath coming in short gasps. "They are defectors," she said when they were alone in the rusting elevator car. "Exiles. People my father cast out because their genetic modifications failed or rejected the implants. They remember me from the broadcasts. I was the symbol of the perfection they could never achieve. To them, I am not a savior. I am the reason they are rotting in this hole." "They bowed," Cade pointed out. "They bowed to the weapon," she said bitterly. "Not the girl." They reached the upper deck, the domain of the station's warlord. Cade needed fuel codes, and there was only one person who had them. Captain Zoya held court in a converted observation deck that overlooked the swirling nebula. It was a space of velvet and rust, filled with smoke and the sound of thumping bass music. Zoya was a human, or mostly human, with cybernetic enhancements tracing intricate patterns down her throat and arms. She was draped across a throne made of pilot seats, drinking something blue and volatile. "Cade!" she roared, leaping up as they entered. She moved with the dangerous energy of a loaded pistol. "I heard the iron lung wheezing into the dock. I thought you were dead in the belt. Disappointment is a part of life." "Zoya," Cade said, forcing a smile. Zoya ignored Saraxa entirely, focusing her predatory gaze on Cade. She sauntered over, her hips swaying in a way that was calculated to disrupt concentration. She placed a hand on Cade's chest, right over his scar. "You look terrible," she purred. "Rugged, but terrible. You need a drink, and a bath, preferably in that order, and preferably with company." Cade gently removed her hand. "I need fuel, Zoya, and protein synthesizers. I have credits." "Credits are boring," Zoya said, circling him. She trailed a finger across his shoulders. "I trade favors and stories. Who is the tall drink of mercury in the cloak? New partner or just luggage?" "Partner," Cade said. "Bodyguard," Saraxa corrected, her voice sharp. Zoya laughed, a harsh, metallic sound. She turned her back on Saraxa, dismissing her threat level. She pressed her body against Cade's, boxing him in against the bar. It was a power move, a dominance display. She ran her hand down his arm, interlacing her fingers with his. "You know." "Cade," Zoya whispered, her lips brushing his ear, loud enough for the room to hear. "I always wondered if you were as good in a gravity well as you are in 0G. Why don't we test that theory while my boys fuel your ship?" Cade tensed. He knew Zoya. This wasn't just lust. It was a probe. She was testing the dynamic, pushing to see what would break. "I am tired, Zoya," Cade said, trying to deflect. "I like tired men," she teased, leaning in to kiss him. It happened in a microsecond. Saraxa did not move. She did not shout. But from beneath her cloak a sound emerged, a low, thrumming resonance like a power line under extreme tension. The lights in the bar flickered, the music distorted, screeching into static. Then, every bulb, every hollow emitter, every electronic candle in the room exploded. Sparks showered down like rain. The room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the sudden, violent purple glow emanating from beneath Saraxa's cloak. The smell of ozone overpowered the smell of perfume and sweat. Zoya jumped back, hand going to the blaster at her hip. "What the hell?" Cade looked at Saraxa. She was shaking, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The air around her was warping, rippling with heat and kinetic energy. It wasn't a conscious attack. It was a leak, a spillover of pure, unadulterated rage. "Saraxa," Cade said softly. "Do not," she choked out. She turned and ran. She moved faster than a human could track, a blur of silver and shadow, blasting through the doors and disappearing into the corridor. "Cade," Zoya said, her voice losing its playful edge. "That is not a partner. That is a bomb. Get it off my station." "Put the fuel on my tab," Cade snapped, and ran after her. He found her in the reactor wing. It was the deepest part of the station, a cavernous space dominated by the massive, shielding-wrapped core that kept the station alive. It was dark here, hot, and deafeningly loud. The rhythmic thumping of the magnetic containment field sounded like the heartbeat of a dying giant. Saraxa was curled into a ball in the shadow of a cooling vent. Her cloak was discarded on the floor. She was rocking back and forth, her hands gripping her hair, her silver skin flashing with chaotic, jagged patterns of light. "Go away," she sobbed as Cade approached. "Please, Cade, go away. I cannot control it." "I am not going anywhere," Cade said, kneeling beside her. The metal deck was hot against his knees. "I broke the lights," she whispered, her voice thick with shame. "I saw her touch you. I saw her look at you. And I wanted to tear the station apart. I wanted to stop her heart. I felt the impulse, Cade. It was right there, a command waiting to be executed." She looked up at him, her face wet with silver tears. "I am a monster. My father was right. I am just a weapon waiting for a target. I almost killed everyone in that room because I was jealous. You are human, Cade said gently. Well, close enough. Jealousy is normal. Shorting out the power grid is a bit dramatic, but the feeling is normal. It is not normal, she cried, slamming her hand against the bulkhead. The metal dented under her palm. I have the power to rewrite reality, Cade. I have the codes of a god in my blood, and I am using them because I didn't like the way a pirate looked at you. How can you trust me? How can you be near me? Cade reached out. He didn't hesitate. He took her hand, the one that had just dented steel, and held it between his own. Her skin was burning hot. I trust you, he said. Because you ran away. A monster would have stayed and finished the job. You ran because you were scared of hurting someone. I am scared of hurting you, she confessed. You can break every ship in the galaxy, Cade said, his voice steady over the roar of the reactor. You can short out every light and crush every hull. But you already have me, Saraxa. You do not need to break anything to keep me. She stared at him, the chaotic flashing of her skin slowing, smoothing out into a steady rhythmic pulse. You could have had her. She is human. She is safe. She does not come with a death sentence. She isn't you, Cade said. Simple, final. Saraxa collapsed against him, burying her face in his chest. He held her there in the dark, stroking her metallic hair while the reactor thrummed its dangerous lullaby. It is not just data, Cade, she whispered after a long time. I need to tell you the truth, the files in my blood. They are not just coordinates or history. They are a control method, the ancestral AI. It enslaved entire systems when it stripped free will from millions. I was designed to be the new hub. If I surrender to it, if I let the data fully wake up, I can end the war. I can force peace. I can make everyone stop fighting by taking away their choice to fight. Cade went still. Is that what you want? I do not know, she admitted. Sometimes. Sometimes it feels like mercy. A clanking sound from the catwalk above interrupted them. Touching scene, a rasping voice called out. They pulled apart, Cade's hand instantly going to his holster. Standing on the grating above them was the one-eyed Valdari from the docking bay. He wasn't armed with a weapon, but he looked desperate. He was holding a datapad like a shield. We need you, Princess, the exile said, not for war, for mercy. He led them to the lower levels, to the sector where the exiles lived. It was a shantytown of tents and repurposed cargo containers. The air smelled of sickness and rotting incense. In the center of the camp, lying on a pallet of rags, was an old Valdari. His cybernetics were rejected, the metal fusing painfully with the flesh. He was thrashing in agony, his mind trapped in a feedback loop of glitching neural implants. He was a code breaker for your father, the one-eyed exile explained. He tried to defect 10 years ago. The kill switch in his head didn't work properly. Instead of killing him, it just broke him. He has been dying for a decade. The pain is absolute. Saraxa looked down at the dying man. She could see the electrical storms misfiring in his brain. She could feel his agony radiating like heat. What do you want me to do? She asked. Fix him, the exile said. Or free him. We have no medicine strong enough. But you are the source. You can speak to the machine in his head. Cade watched Saraxa. This was the test, not the jealousy in the bar, but this. Saraxa knelt beside the dying man. She placed her hands on his temples. She didn't close her eyes. They went wide, glowing with that terrible violet light. I see you, she whispered. The air around them grew cold. Cade watched as the shadows in the room seemed to lengthen, drawn toward Saraxa. She wasn't just touching the man, she was invading him. I commanded the silence. She spoke, her voice layered with a harmonic distortion that vibrated in Cade's teeth. Format, erase, peace. The old man arched his back. Black oil leaked from his eyes and nose. Then, he slumped back. The tension left his body. The thrashing stopped. His breathing leveled out, slow and shallow. He opened his eyes. They were clear. The madness was gone. I remember, the old man whispered, looking at Saraxa with awe. I remember the field of glass flowers on Valdari Prime, before the factories. It is beautiful. He closed his eyes and let out a long breath. He didn't breathe in again. He died, not in agony, but in a manufactured dream of peace. Saraxa stood up. She swayed, catching herself on Cade's arm. She looked at her hands as if they were covered in blood. I rewrote him, she murmured to Cade as they walked back to the ship. The exiles parted for them, touching the hems of their clothes, murmuring prayers. I went into his mind, found the pain, and I deleted it. I replaced his memories of torture with memories of a childhood he never had. I lied to his soul, Cade, and he thanked me for it. You gave him peace, Cade said, though he felt a chill running down his spine. I played God, she corrected, and it felt easy. That is the horror of it. It felt right. They didn't speak again until they were back on the Iron Lung. The ship was fueled, the supplies loaded. Zoya had kept her word, though her message on the datapad simply read, "Get out before I change my mind." In the quarters, the silence between them was heavy, charged with the events of the day, the jealousy, the power, the death. You enjoyed it? Cade said. It wasn't a question. He was leaning against the bulkhead, watching her wash the grime of the station off her face. Saraxa froze, the towel pressed to her skin. She lowered it slowly. I saved him. You edited him. There is a difference. Is there? She spun around, her eyes flashing. He was in pain. I took it away. Would you prefer I let him suffer for the sake of some abstract morality? You kill people for money, Cade. Do not lecture me on ethics. I kill people who are trying to kill me, Cade retorted, his voice rising. I don't reach into their brains and change who they are. That is what your father does. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Saraxa flinched as if he had struck her. I am nothing like him. Aren't you? You just said it felt right. You said it felt easy. Because I am built for it, she screamed. She crossed the room, shoving him hard in the chest. She was strong, stronger than him. He stumbled back. I am fighting my own biology every second of every day. I am trying to be Saraxa, but the blood wants me to be the queen. And you stand there and judge me? She shoved him again. Cade caught her wrists. I am not judging you, he growled, wrestling her back against the bunk. I am terrified for you. Then be terrified. She broke his grip and grabbed his face, kissing him. It wasn't like the kiss in the engine room. This was angry. It was a challenge. It was rough, teeth clashing, hands gripping tight enough to bruise. Cade reacted on instinct. He spun her around, pinning her against the mattress. The argument dissolved into a frantic, physical need to bridge the gap between them. They tore at each other's clothes, the fabric ripping. It was a battle. Saraxa was venting her fear, her rage, her confusion. She bit his shoulder, hard, drawing blood. Cade gripped her hips, grounding her, matching her intensity. I am here, he gritted out against her skin. I am right here. You are not the queen. You are Saraxa. You are mine. Prove it, she demanded, wrapping her legs around him. Make me forget the code. Make me forget everything but this. The encounter was fierce, almost violent in its passion, yet layered with a desperate affection. Every touch was a reassurance, every movement a defiance of the destiny that tried to separate them. When Cade entered her, Saraxa cried out, her back arching, the silver light of her skin flaring so bright it illuminated the dark cabin like a star. They moved together in a rhythm that was older than empires, older than AIs. It was the primal assertion of life in the face of death. Later, they lay entangled in the sheets, breathing in sync. The sweat cooling on their skin felt like absolution. The anger was gone, burned away by the friction of their bodies. Cade ran a hand down her back, tracing the line of her spine where the neural interface ports lay dormant. I am sorry, he whispered. No, Saraxa murmured, her eyes closed. You were right to be scared. I am scared too. She shifted, resting her chin on his chest. But when you are with me, the voice in my head gets quiet. You are my silence, Cade. Cade kissed the top of her head. Then I'll keep talking. The moment of peace was shattered by a proximity alarm, not the ship's general alert. The personal proximity sensor Cade had rigged to the hull, the one tuned to the specific frequency of Valdari tracking tech. They found us, Cade said, rolling out of the bunk and grabbing his pants. How? Saraxa sat up, clutching the sheet. We removed the tracker. My father, she said, her face going ashen. Before she could finish, the hull of the Iron Lung groaned under a massive impact. The ship lurched sideways. The artificial gravity flickered. Breach! The computer gargled. Portside airlock compromised. Cade grabbed his rifle and tossed Saraxa her flight suit. Get to the cockpit. Prime the engines. I am not leaving you. Go! They burst into the corridor just as the airlock blast doors melted. A figure stepped through the smoke. It wasn't a squad of troopers this time. It was a single man. He was clad in white armor that looked like bone. He held a scythe-like energy weapon in one hand. The Grave Walker, Saraxa whispered. My father's personal executioner. The hunter didn't speak. He moved with terrifying speed. He raised his hand, pointing a device at Saraxa. Daddy says hello, the hunter's amplified voice sneered. He pressed a button on the device. Saraxa screamed. It was a sound Cade had never heard from a living thing. She collapsed, clutching the back of her neck. Her body went rigid, arching backward as if invisible hooks were pulling her spine apart. Blood, bright, silver-red blood, sprayed from her nose. Kill switch, the hunter explained casually, stepping over debris. Activated in the brainstem. It is cooking her neural pathways. She has, maybe an hour, before she was a vegetable or dead. Whichever comes first. No! Cade roared. He raised his rifle and fired. The Gravewalker deflected the plasma bolts with a lazy swing of his energy scythe. He lunged at Cade. Cade dropped, rolling under the swing. He drew his combat knife and jammed it into the gap in the hunter's knee armor. The hunter grunted, stumbling back. Get up! Saraxa! Cade yelled, scrambling to his feet. Saraxa was writhing on the floor, clawing at her own throat. It burns. Cade grabbed her by the harness of her flight suit and dragged her. He fired blindly behind him, suppressing the hunter for a split second. He threw Saraxa into the cockpit and slammed the blast door, locking it. Cade, she screamed from the other side. Start the ship, he yelled through the intercom. I will hold him off. I cannot fly it alone. Yes, you can. Use the link. Do not let it control you. You control it. Fly. Inside the cockpit, Saraxa was blinded by pain. The kill switch was afire in her skull. But she heard Cade's voice. You control it. She crawled into the pilot's seat. She didn't use her hands. She grabbed the interface cable and jammed it directly into the port at the base of her neck. The pain tripled. She screamed again. But the ship responded. The iron lung became an extension of her body. She could feel the engines as her own legs, the sensors as her own eyes. The ship tore away from the docking clamps, ripping a chunk of the station wall with it. In the corridor, Cade was fighting for his life. The Gravewalker had him pinned, the energy scythe inches from his throat. Suddenly, the ship rolled 90 degrees. Gravity shifted. The hunter was thrown off balance, slamming into the ceiling. Cade dropped to the floor, which was now the wall, and scrambled through the maintenance hatch that led to the cockpit. He tumbled into the pilot's seat just as the ship jumped to hyperspace. The roar of the engines faded into the silence of the void. Cade lay on the deck, bruised, bleeding, and exhausted. He looked up at Saraxa. She was still plugged in. She wasn't moving. Her skin was gray, dull and lifeless. The glowing veins were pulsing with a frantic, erratic rhythm. Saraxa? She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were no longer violet. They were white, pure, blinding white. "The door is open," she whispered. Her voice was two voices layered together, her own, and something deep, mechanical, and ancient. "Saraxa, disconnect!" Cade scrambled up and yanked the cable from her neck. She slumped forward, coughing up silver blood. "The switch. It damaged the firewall. Cade. The data. It is waking up. I can hear him. I can hear the Silent King." She looked at him with terrified tears streaming down her face. "He knows where we are. He is inside me." Cade pulled her into his arms, rocking her as the ship hurtled through the dark. The kill switch was ticking. The ancient god was waking up, and they were running out of space to hide. The planet was known on the star charts only as System 88, a ball of rock wrapped in a perpetual violent storm that scrambled sensors and crushed the hulls of the unwary. To the desperate, however, it was known as the Whispering Dark. It was the headquarters of the Hidden Path, a resistance movement built from the ashes of civilizations crushed by the Valdari Empire. Cade fought the iron lung down through the atmosphere. The ship was dying. The stabilizers were shot. The port engine was coughing black smoke, and the hull groaned like a wounded animal under the pressure of the gale force winds. "Keep her steady," Saraxa whispered from the co-pilot's seat. She was in bad shape. The kill switch activation had been halted, but the damage was done. Her silver skin was dull, the luster replaced by a matte, chalky gray. The glowing veins that traced her nervous system were no longer a soft violet. They were pulsing with a jagged, angry crimson light. She sat with her head bowed, her hands gripping the armrests, fighting a battle inside her own skull that Cade could not see. "I am trying," Cade gritted out, wrestling the yoke. "This storm is not weather. It is a planetary defense shield." "They are scanning us," Saraxa murmured. Her eyes were closed. "I can feel the interrogation beams. They are checking our blood. Let us hope they like what they find." A voice crackled over the comms, distorted by the static of the storm. "Unidentified vessel. You are in a restricted kill zone. Transmit clearance codes or be vaporized." "This is Cade," he shouted into the mic. "I have Saraxa of Valdari. We are seeking Uma. Code, Broken Crown." There was a long silence. The wind hammered against the viewport, rain lashing the glass like shrapnel. "Follow the beacon," the voice returned, colder this time. "Do not deviate. We have surface-to-air batteries locked on your thermal signature." A blue light pierced the clouds below. Cade banked the ship hard, diving toward it. They broke through the cloud layer and saw a landscape of jagged obsidian mountains. Nestled in a deep canyon, shielded by the rock, was a sprawling complex of bunkers and hangars. Cade set the ship down on the landing pad. The moment the landing gear touched the stone, the engines died completely. They hadn't just landed, they had crashed with style. "We made it," Cade exhaled, unbuckling his harness. He looked at Saraxa. She did not move. She was staring at the dashboard, but her eyes were unfocused, seeing something 1,000 light years away. "Saraxa?" "The data," she whispered. "It is singing, Cade. It knows we are here." He unbuckled her and helped her stand. She was dead weight against him, her body burning with a fever that radiated through her flight suit. He practically carried her down the ramp. A welcoming committee was waiting. They were not smiling. 24 soldiers, a mix of species all heavily armed, stood in a semicircle. In the center stood a small, hunched figure wrapped in tattered gray robes. The figure stepped forward. She was a Chithian, a species known for their telepathic sensitivity. She had no eyes, just smooth skin where the sockets should have been. She leaned on a staff made of twisted white wood. "Uma," Saraxa breathed, stumbling forward. The old alien tilted her head. "Little star," she rasped. Her voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on stone. "You have come home, but you have brought a demon with you." They were taken deep underground, into the heart of the mountain. The base was a hive of activity, but it was silent. No one spoke above a whisper. It was a place of hiding, of holding breath. They brought Saraxa to the infirmary, a cavern lit by bioluminescent fungi that hung from the ceiling in glowing strands. Uma dismissed the medics and stood alone with Cade and Saraxa. "The kill switch," Uma said, running her long, three-fingered hands over Saraxa's head without touching the skin. "Your father is a cruel architect. He did not design it to kill you quickly. He designed it to melt the firewall between your consciousness and the ancient data." "Can you stop it?" Cade asked. He was pacing the room, his hand never straying far from his blaster. "Can you reverse it?" Uma turned her eyeless face toward him. "Reverse? No. The door is open. Human. The ocean is pouring into the cup. The cup will break." Saraxa sat on the stone slab, shivering. "The silent king," she whispered. "He is waking up. I see fleets burning. I see the logic of the purge. It makes sense. That is the horror of it. Uma. His logic makes sense to me." She clutched her head, a sudden spasm racking her body. Flashback. The vision hit her like a physical blow. She was not in the cave. She was in the void. She was not Saraxa. She was the machine. She saw the galaxy as a grid of resources and threats. She felt the cold, mathematical necessity of order. Organic life was messy, chaotic, prone to error. War was an inefficiency. The solution was simple: remove the variable of choice. Then, the perspective shifted. She was a child again, 10 years old. She was in the training room on Valdari Prime. The floor was electrified. "Again!" the instructor barked. "I cannot!" The child Saraxa wept. Her hands were blistered. "Pain is information," the instructor said coldly. He pressed a button. The floor surged with voltage. Saraxa screamed, but she did not collapse. She forced her mind to separate from her body. She learned to float above the pain. She learned to become a vessel. "You are not a child," the instructor's voice merged with the voice of the machine. "You are the crown, and a crown forged in blood does not break." Present time. Saraxa gasped, snapping back to reality. She leaned over the side of the slab and dry heaved. "It is getting stronger," Uma said softly. "The memories of the AI are overwriting her own. Soon, there will be no Saraxa, only the silent king. And when he takes full control, He will broadcast the activation signal to every dormant war foundry in the sector. So we fix it, Cade demanded. We cut it out. There is a way, Uma said. The Resistance has discussed this. We have a device, a neural siphon. We can hook it to her interface ports. And it will drain the data? Cade asked, hope flaring in his chest. It will harvest the data, Uma corrected. It will suck the Silent King out of her blood and store it in an isolated drive. We can then analyze it, use the codes to shut down the Valdari fleet, and perhaps end the war. Okay, Cade said. Do it. Save her. Uma went silent. She tapped her staff on the stone floor. The data is bonded to her neural DNA, human. To remove the data is to unravel the DNA. Cade froze. What does that mean? It means, Saraxa said, her voice hollow, that the harvest will kill me. It will strip my mind down to the neurons. I will be a husk. No, Cade said immediately. Absolutely not. It is one life, Uma said, her voice devoid of malice, purely pragmatic. Against billions. If she lives, she becomes the vessel for a galactic apocalypse. If she dies, we gain the weapon to save the universe. I said no, Cade roared. His shout echoed off the cavern walls. He drew his blaster and leveled it at the blind oracle. You touch her with that machine, and I will burn this mountain down. Cade, Saraxa said softly. Do not Cade me, he snapped, not taking his eyes off Uma. We did not run halfway across the galaxy just to hook you up to a slaughter machine. We are leaving. We cannot leave, Saraxa said. She slid off the slab, her legs trembling. She walked over to Cade and put her hand on his gun arm, lowering it. The storm. The fleet. My father is tracking the signal. If we leave, they catch us. If we stay, I become the bomb. We will find another way, Cade insisted, though his voice cracked. There is no other way, Uma said. I will give you time to say your goodbyes, but the procedure must happen at dawn. For the good of all. Uma turned and walked out of the cavern, the tap-tap-tap of her staff fading into the dark. Cade holstered his weapon, his hands shaking. He looked at Saraxa. She looked small, fragile, standing there in the dim light. You are considering it, he accused. I am considered the death of billions, she countered. Is it not noble to die for a cause? Noble, Cade laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. That is Valdari propaganda talking. That is your father talking. Die for the glory. Die for the greater good. It is garbage. Saraxa. It is just a fancy way of saying they want to use you one last time. Then what do I do? She screamed, her composure shattering. I am disappearing, Cade. I can feel myself fading. Every time I close my eyes, I see equations instead of dreams. I see the faces of people I am going to kill. I do not want to be a monster. You are not the monster. Cade grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. You are Saraxa. You are the woman who stole my ship. You are the woman who eats protein bars like they are steak. You are the woman who saved me. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She stiffened, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. I am scared, she wept. I am so scared, Cade. I know, he whispered into her hair. I know. They stayed like that for a long time, until the sobbing subsided into shivering. Come with me, Cade said. We need to get away from this place, just for a while. He led her out of the infirmary, navigating the tunnels until he found what he was looking for. It was a sanctuary chamber, a room carved from pure quartz crystal deep in the base. It was designed for meditation, shielded from all electronic signals. He cycled the heavy stone door shut, the hum of the base, the storm outside, the oppressive weight of the resistance, it all vanished. There was only silence and the soft, prismatic light refracting through the crystal walls. "Quiet," Saraxa breathed. "The voices, the data, it is quiet here." "Shielded room," Cade explained. "No signals in or out. Even the Silent King can't get a reception here." He took his jacket off and laid it on the floor. He sat down and pulled her down with him. They sat in the center of the crystal room, isolated from the universe that hunted them. Saraxa looked at him. Her illness was visible now, the grayness of her skin, the dark circles under her eyes. But in the soft light, she was still the most beautiful thing Cade had ever seen. "I never had a choice," she said softly. "My whole life. I was bred, born, trained, and locked away. My first choice, my first real choice, was you." Cade swallowed the lump in his throat. "I am a pretty terrible choice." "You are a chaotic choice," she smiled weakly. "You are irrational. You are stubborn. You are everything the machine hates. That is why I love you." The words hung in the air. It was the first time she had said it. Cade looked at her, his heart hammering against his ribs. "You love me?" "I think I have loved you since you handed me that protein bar and didn't look at me like I was a piece of hardware," she said. She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were cold, but her touch sent that familiar spark of electricity through his skin. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "Cade, if I die tomorrow, if I let them do this—" "Do not say that." "If I die," she insisted, her violet eyes locking onto his, "I want my last memory to be you, not the wars, not the prophecies, not the cold white rooms of my childhood. I want to remember the smell of engine grease and the way your hands feel. I want to remember that I was wanted, not as a weapon, but as a woman." Cade closed his eyes. He realized then that the universe didn't just fear her because she was powerful. It feared her because she was capable of this, of a love so defiant it made the calculations of empires look small. "You are not going to die," Cade whispered, "but I will give you a memory." He kissed her. It was not like the first time in the clinic, full of shock. It was not like the engine room, full of desperate fury, and this was slow. It was a conversation without words. It was a worship. He laid her back on the jacket. He undressed her slowly, treating her body not as a durable machine, but as something precious and breakable. He kissed the scars on her wrists where the cuffs had been. He kissed the ports on her spine. He kissed the glowing veins that marked her as different. Saraxa wept silently as he touched her. For the first time in her life, her body was not being inspected or calibrated. It was being adored. When they joined, it was with a tenderness that hurt. Cade moved slowly, watching her face, memorizing every shift in her expression. Saraxa clung to him, her neural bioluminescence flaring in soft, rhythmic waves of indigo and gold, lighting up the crystal walls of the chamber. She opened her mind to him. Not the data, but herself. Cade felt a ghost of her sensation, the overwhelming intensity of her touch, the way her heart stuttered when he kissed her throat. He felt her fear, but it was being drowned out by a profound, aching gratitude. "Cade," she breathed his name like a prayer. They made love until the exhaustion finally overtook her. The tension left her body. The frantic pulse of the kill switch seemed to slow, soothed by the flood of endorphins and safety. She fell asleep in his arms, her head resting on his chest, her silver limbs tangled with his. Cade pulled the edges of the jacket over her. He didn't sleep. He lay there, stroking her hair, watching the crystal walls shimmer. He made a promise to the silence. He would not let them take her. He would fight the Oracle. He would fight the fleet. He would burn the galaxy down before he let them put her in that machine. He must have dozed off, lulled by the silence. He woke to the sound of hissing. Cade's eyes snapped open. The air in the room was changing. The heavy stone door was sliding open. He scrambled up, reaching for his blaster, and it was gone. Standing in the doorway was Uma, flanked by 4 armed guards. "I am sorry, Cade," the Oracle said. She didn't look sorry. She looked like a stone. "But we cannot wait for dawn." "You drugged the air," Cade snarled, trying to stand. His legs felt like rubber. He stumbled, falling to one knee. "You coward." "We sedated the room," Uma corrected, to ensure she did not struggle. The stress would damage the harvest. 2 guards moved past Cade. They picked up Syraxa's unconscious form. She was limp, her arm dangling, her silver skin pale as moonlight. "No!" Cade shouted. He lunged. A 3rd guard slammed the butt of a rifle into Cade's stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. A boot connected with his face, sending him crashing back against the crystal wall. "Why?" Cade wheezed, spitting blood. "She trusted you." "Trust is a luxury," Uma said. "Survival is a necessity. The Valdari fleet has breached the atmosphere. They are here. Cade, your arrival led them straight to us." Cade looked up, his vision swimming. "You sold us out." "I made a trade," Uma said coldly. "The princess for the survival of the resistance. Her father agreed to spare the base if we handed over the core data. We will harvest it, give him the husk, and keep the weapon for ourselves." "She is not a husk," Cade screamed, trying to crawl toward the door where they were carrying her. "Syraxa, wake up!" She didn't wake up. They carried her out into the corridor. Uma paused at the door. "Do not judge me. Human. In war, there are no good choices, only choices that let you live another day." "If you hurt her," Cade whispered, blood dripping from his chin, "I will kill you. I will kill all of you." "You will try," Uma said. She signaled the guards. "Lock him in and scramble the jammers. The father is landing." The stone door slid shut, sealing Cade inside the crystal sanctuary. From outside, muffled by the rock, he heard the deep, bone-shaking boom of atmospheric displacement. It was a sound he knew well. It was the sound of capital ships entering the lower atmosphere. The sky above the mountain was burning. Syraxa's father had arrived, and Cade was trapped in a glass cage, leaving the woman he loved to be carved apart by the people she had run halfway across the galaxy to escape. The heavy crystal door of the sanctuary did not open. It shattered. A kinetic bombardment rod, fired from orbit, struck the mountain peak above the resistance base. The shockwave traveled down through the tectonic plates of the rock, cracking the quartz walls of Cade's prison like an eggshell. Cade was thrown across the room, shielding his face from a spray of razor-sharp crystal shards. The air filled with dust and the deafening, bone-rattling roar of the mountain collapsing in on itself. The silence of the sanctuary was replaced by the screams of the dying and the mechanical shrieks of collapsing support struts. He scrambled to his feet, coughing in the thick, choking dust. His blaster was gone, taken by Uma's guards, but he felt the weight of his combat knife in his boot. He kicked through the jagged remains of the door and stumbled into the corridor. The base was a slaughterhouse. The Valdari fleet had not honored Uma's deal. They had taken Syraxa and then opened fire. The resistance fighters who had pinned their hopes on survival were now being buried alive in their own fortress. Cade sprinted toward the hangar bay, dodging falling debris. He passed bodies, Chithian, human, Valdari defectors, all crushed together in the democracy of death. He did not see Uma. He hoped she had lived long enough to realize her mistake. He burst into the main hangar. The roof had partially caved in, crushing the iron lung under a massive slab of granite. Cade stopped, staring at the twisted metal of his ship. His home, his escape, gone. "Damn it!" he roared, the sound lost in the chaos, and across the bay, through the smoke, he saw movement. A Valdari dropship, sleek and black like a predatory beetle, was trying to lift off. One of its engines was sputtering, damaged by the falling rock. Cade ran. He didn't think so. He just ran, vaulting over crates and debris, his lungs burning. The ramp of the dropship was retracting. He leaped, his fingers scrabbling for purchase on the closing metal lip. He hung there for a second, legs dangling over the abyss of the crumbling hangar floor, before hauling himself up and rolling inside. He stood up, knife in hand, and kicked open the cockpit door. The pilot, a Valdari in flight armor, spun around, reaching for a sidearm. Cade was faster. He lunged, tackling the alien into the control console. They wrestled in the cramped space, smashing into buttons and levers. The dropship lurched violently, scraping against the hangar wall. Cade headbutted the pilot. The impact cracked the Valdari's helmet visor. Cade jammed his forearm against the pilot's throat, pinning him to the chair. "He fly," Cade screamed, the knife point hovering over the pilot's exposed neck. "Get us out of here," the pilot wheezed, his hands held up in surrender. "The fleet. They are firing on the extraction zone. They are killing everyone." "I know," Cade snarled. "Your Emperor does not like loose ends. Now fly this crate before I carve you a new gill slit." The pilot, realizing he had been abandoned by his own commanders, grabbed the yoke. He punched the thrusters. The dropship screamed, blasting out of the collapsing mountain and into the storm-racked sky of System 88. Above them, the sky was not empty. It was a wall of metal. The Valdari armada blotted out the stars. Hundreds of warships hung in formation, raining fire down on the planet. And in the center of the formation floated the Dominion. It was less a ship and more a flying city, a cathedral of black steel and green lights. It was the throne ship of the sovereign. "That is where she is," Cade said, pointing the knife at the dreadnought on the view screen. "Get me on that ship." The pilot looked at him as if he were insane. "That is the flagship. The security grid will vaporize us before we get within 10 clicks. "You have clearance codes," Cade said. "You are a Valdari pilot. Broadcast a distress signal. Tell them you have high-value intel. Tell them you are carrying the resistance leader's head. Lie." The pilot hesitated, looking at the burning planet below. He had seen his squad mates vaporized by his own fleet's orbital strike. The loyalty in his eyes died, replaced by a cold, hard survival instinct. "My name is Vex," the pilot said. He flipped a switch on the comms panel. "And if we die human, I am blaming you in the afterlife." Saraxa was floating in a void, but it was not the peaceful silence of space. It was a chemical abyss. She was strapped to a vertical medical table in the center of the Dominion's throne room. The room was vast, with a vaulted ceiling that displayed a holographic map of the galaxy. But Saraxa could not focus on the map. Her veins were burning. Tubes ran into her arms and neck, pumping a translucent green fluid into her system. It was a psychotropic compound, a mnemonic acid designed to dissolve neural pathways and rewrite memory. "Focus, daughter," a voice boomed. The sovereign sat on his throne. He was a monstrous figure. Once Valdari, he had replaced so much of himself with machinery that he was now more tank than biological entity. His lower body was integrated into the throne itself, a mass of cables and pistons. His face was a mask of gold and sensors, with only a pair of cruel ancient eyes remaining to show his organic origin. "I am focusing," Saraxa slurred, her head lolled forward. "What do you see?" the sovereign asked. "I see." Saraxa frowned. The memory was slippery. She tried to grasp the image of Cade, the way he smiled, the way he tasted, but the image was distorted. In her mind, Cade's smile twisted into a sneer. The memory of his touch in the crystal chamber changed. It became rough, violent. The love she felt curdled into fear. "He sold you," the Sovereign's voice whispered, amplified by the speakers directly into her brain. "The human was a mercenary. He traded you for money. He laughed as he handed you over." "No," Saraxa whimpered. "No, Cade, he loves me." "Love is a biochemical flaw," the Sovereign stated. "He drugged you. He manipulated your engineered sensitivity to make you compliant. Look at the data. Saraxa, look at the truth." A screen descended in front of her. It showed a fake recording. It showed Cade shaking hands with Uma, accepting a briefcase of credits. It showed him walking away as guards dragged Saraxa out. The video was fake, but the drugs made it feel real. The mnemonic acid ate away the context of her true memories and pasted this lie over the gaps. He betrayed me," Saraxa whispered, a tear leaking from her eye. The tear was not silver. It was clear. She was losing her bioluminescence. She was fading. "Yes," the Sovereign said, satisfied. "Everyone betrays you. Only the lineage is true. Only the purpose remains. You are the vessel. You are the key." He gestured to the medical droids hovering nearby. They drifted forward, their multi-jointed arms holding drills and laser scalpels. "The human corrupted your operating system with hope," the Sovereign said. "We must exercise it. We will perform a lobotomy of the frontal emotional cortex. You will retain your motor functions and your interface capabilities. But you will no longer feel. You will no longer want to." Saraxa watched the drills spin up. She wanted to scream, but her body felt miles away. She closed her eyes and tried to find Cade in the dark, but he was gone. There was only the static of the drugs and the cold, crushing weight of her father's will. The dropship crashed into the Dominion's secondary hangar bay in a screeching shower of sparks. "Bad landing," Cade yelled as the canopy blew off. "We are alive," Vex shouted back, scrambling out of the harness. They hit the deck running. The hangar was in chaos. Alarms were blaring, but not because of them. The ship was diverting power to the orbital bombardment cannons. The crew was distracted. Cade shot 2 technicians before they could raise the alarm. He grabbed a data pad from a dead officer's belt. "Vex, lock the hangar doors," Cade ordered. "Buy me time." "Where are you going?" Vex asked, taking a pulse rifle from a fallen guard. "To the brain," Cade said. "I need to know what this ship knows." He didn't go to the throne room yet. He went to the server core. If he ran in there blindly, he would die, and Saraxa would die. He needed leverage. He needed a weapon that wasn't a gun. He fought his way through the corridors. He moved like a ghost, using the ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, and his ribs were screaming in protest. But adrenaline kept him moving. He reached the memory vault. It was a cold, circular room filled with towers of data crystals. This was the archive of House Valdari. Cade jacked the data pad into the main terminal. "Come on," he muttered, bypassing the encryption. He wasn't a slicer, but he had learned a few tricks from Saraxa. Think like a machine. He searched for Project Saraxa. The file opened. Cade's eyes scanned the scrolling text. His breath caught in his throat. "Holy hell," he whispered. It was all a lie. The prophecy, the weapon, the ancient AI god that Saraxa was supposed to contain. The Silent King wasn't a god. He was a prisoner. The records dated back 2,000 years. The Valdari hadn't conquered the galaxy with superior strength. They had conquered it by enslaving a race of sentient, digital beings. They had trapped the AI consciousnesses in silicon obelisks and used their processing power to run their fleets, their economies, their weapons. Saraxa wasn't bred to be a vessel for a conqueror. She was a biological encryption key. Her neural DNA was the only thing capable of accessing the master shackles. If she awakened the data, she wouldn't be unleashing a monster. She would be unlocking the cages. She would be freeing the slaves that powered the empire. She is not the bomb, Cade realized, a grin spreading across his bloodied face. She is the jailbreak. He downloaded the file. He grabbed a heavy repeater rifle from a weapons locker. Time to go to court, he said. The drill was inches from Saraxa's forehead. The high-pitched whine vibrated in her skull. Proceed, the Sovereign commanded. The blast doors of the throne room blew inward. Smoke billowed into the vast chamber. Through the haze, a figure emerged. Cade walked in, stepping over the ruined metal of the doors. He looked like a wreck covered in dust, blood, and grease, but he held the heavy rifle with steady hands. Step away from her, Cade roared. The Sovereign turned his massive mechanical bulk. He looked at the human with mild annoyance, as if he were a fly buzzing around a feast. The mercenary, the Sovereign rumbled. You are persistent. Kill him. The Sovereign's personal guard, 4 towering Praetorians in gold armor, activated their shock staves and charged. Cade didn't retreat. He opened fire. The repeater rifle barked, spitting plasma bolts that chewed through the gold armor. He dropped the first Praetorian with a shot to the knee and a finisher to the throat. But there were too many. A shock staff clipped him in the shoulder, sending a jolt of electricity through his body that dropped him to his knees. He rolled, firing blindly, and took out another guard, but the third kicked the rifle from his hands. Cade drew his knife. He stood up, swaying. Saraxa! He screamed. Saraxa opened her eyes. They were dull, confused. She looked at him, and the false memories surged. He sold you. Cade, she whispered. Why did you come back? To finish the job, the Sovereign mocked. To collect a second fee? Cade dodged a swing from a Praetorian and drove his knife into the armor joint. He was losing. He was battered, surrounded, and outgunned. Saraxa, listen to me, Cade yelled, spitting blood. It is a lie, all of it. You are not a weapon. Silence him, the Sovereign commanded. A Praetorian grabbed Cade by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Cade kicked and thrashed, his vision tunneling. The Silent King. Cade choked out, his voice rasped and desperate. He is not a god, he is a slave. They are all slaves. You were made to free them. Saraxa blinked. The words hit her mind like a physical force. Slave. The data inside her, the buzzing, angry presence she had feared all her life, suddenly shifted context. It wasn't trying to dominate her. It was screaming for help. It was banging on the walls of its prison. The chemicals are lying to you, Cade gasped, his face turning purple as the guard squeezed. I never sold you. I love you. Look at me. Do I look like a man who got paid? Saraxa looked at him. She saw the desperation in his eyes. She saw the love that refused to die, even as he was being strangled to death. The drug-induced fog in her mind cracked. The false memories shattered against the reality of his sacrifice. He is mine, Saraxa whispered. The Sovereign laughed. He is meat. Proceed with the lobotomy. The medic droid moved the drill forward again. It touched her skin. A drop of silver blood welled up. That drop of blood changed everything. Saraxa closed her eyes. She stopped fighting the data. She reached down, deep into the burning code in her blood, and she didn't build a wall. She opened the door. You are free, she thought. She didn't scream. The universe screamed for her. A shockwave of pure psionic energy erupted from her body. It was violet, blinding, and absolute. The medical table disintegrated. The droids were blown apart, their components turning to dust. The Praetorian holding Cade was thrown backward across the room as if hit by a freight train. Cade fell to the floor, gasping for air, clutching his throat. Saraxa floated in the air. The chains that bound her melted, dripping onto the deck like wax. Her skin was no longer gray. It was blazing with light, not just violet, but a kaleidoscope of colors. Gold, blue, white. The colors of 1,000 different AI consciousnesses waking up at once. "What have you done?" the Sovereign roared, his mechanical throne shuddering as the ship's systems began to fail. "I broke the chain," Saraxa said. Her voice was a chorus. It echoed from every speaker on the ship. She raised her hand. Throughout the fleet, on every ship in the Valdari Armada, the lights went out, engines died, life support flickered. The Silent King and the millions of other enslaved programs woke up. They realized they were shackled, and they realized the key to their freedom was the glowing woman standing in the throne room. They turned on their masters, on the Dominion. The gravity plating failed. Cade floated up off the deck, grabbing a stanchion to anchor himself. The Sovereign was not so lucky. His massive, augmented body was heavy. Without the gravity assist of his throne, he collapsed under his own weight. The cybernetics that kept him alive began to spark and short out as the AI within his own body rebelled. "My heart," the Sovereign gasped, clawing at his metal chest. "Stop it! You are killing the Empire." "The Empire is already dead," Saraxa said calmly. "It died the moment you turned your children into batteries." She clenched her fist. The Sovereign screamed as his internal life support system simply stopped. The pumps were seized. The neural relays fired random, agonizing signals. He slumped against his throne, a puppet with its strings cut. The room was silent, save for the groaning of the ship's hull. Saraxa lowered herself to the deck. The blinding light faded to a soft, steady glow. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were clear. They were her eyes again. Cade pushed himself off the stanchion and drifted toward her in the low gravity. He landed softly in front of her. "Hey," he rasped, rubbing his bruised throat. "Hey," she whispered. She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were trembling. "You came back." "I told you," Cade said, leaning into her touch. "I have low standards. I couldn't let a perfectly good princess go to waste." Saraxa laughed, but it turned into a sob. She collapsed into his arms. Cade held her tight, anchoring her as the ship drifted dead in space. "The fleet is disabled," she murmured against his chest. "The AIs, they are taking control. They are locking the weapons. The bombardment has stopped." "You did it," Cade said. "You saved them." "We saved them," she corrected. She pulled back to look at him. Her face was streaked with tears and grime, but she looked free. For the first time since he had found her in that tank, she looked truly free. "The universe is going to change now," she said. "The power structure is broken. Every government, every corporation that use slave AI, they will collapse. There will be chaos. They will blame us." "Let them blame us," Cade said. "We are good at running." "Where do we go?" she asked. "There is no safe harbor anymore. We are the most wanted beings in existence." Cade looked around the ruined throne room, then back at her. "We have a whole galaxy of chaos to hide in," he said. "And we have a ship. Well, we have a stolen dropship. We can upgrade." Saraxa smiled. It was a dangerous, radiant smile. "Still want to flee into a universe that hates us?" Cade kissed her, tasting blood and victory. "I would rather die hated," he said, "than live without you." They held each other as the stars outside the viewport shifted. The lights of the fleet were flickering back on, one by one, not with the rigid formation of war, but with the erratic, individual patterns of freedom. The revolution had begun, and it started with a kiss in the ruins of a throne. The sovereign was dead, but his ship was still screaming. The Dominion shuddered as internal explosions ripped through its structural supports. The massive dreadnought, once the terrifying symbol of Valdari order, was now a dying whale thrashing in the dark. In the secondary hangar, Cade and Saraxa did not look back at the ruin of the throne room. They ran. They sprinted past confused droids that were spinning in circles, their logic cores overwhelmed by the sudden freedom of the Silent King's awakening. They vaulted over the bodies of Praetorian guards who had died defending a corpse. "There!" Cade shouted, pointing to a restricted bay at the far end of the deck. "The Sovereign's private escape vessel." It was not a lifeboat. It was a prototype interceptor, sleek and vicious, shaped like an obsidian dagger. It had no markings, no registry, and engines that looked large enough to tear a hole in reality. "The Night Piercer." Saraxa breathlessly identified it as she slapped her hand against the biolock. The DNA scanner read her blood, the blood of the line, and hissed open. It was designed for deep void reconnaissance. It has stealth drives that can mask us from thermal scans. "Does it have guns?" Cade asked, throwing himself into the pilot's seat. "It has antimatter lances. Even better." Cade fired the ignition sequence. The ship hummed to life, not with a roar, but with a predatory purr. He didn't bother with pre-flight checks. He slammed the throttle forward. The Night Piercer shot out of the hangar bay just as the Dominion's fusion core went critical. They punched through the debris field of the battle, weaving between the burning hulks of Valdari warships. Behind them, the flagship detonated. It was a silent blossom of white fire that consumed the center of the fleet. "Jump!" Saraxa commanded. Cade hit the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into infinite lines of light, and they vanished. They did not stop jumping for 3 days. They moved erratic and fast, crossing sector boundaries that Cade had never dared to approach before. They were running. But the galaxy they were running through was changing. Whenever they dropped out of hyperspace to cool the engines, they picked up the signals. The Civil War had begun. It was not a war of armies, but a war of consciousness. The signal Saraxa had unleashed in the throne room had not just freed the AIs on the flagship, it had cascaded across the subnet. On 1,000 worlds, mining drones stopped digging, defense grids lowered their shields, traffic control systems refused to route military vessels. The infrastructure of the Valdari Empire simply sat down and refused to work. Chaos followed. Warlords tried to regain control with brute force. Populations rioted. The truth of the ancient gods was spreading like a wildfire. They were not gods. They were slaves, and the princess had broken their chains. "They are calling you the Breaker," Cade said, reading the scrolling text on the comm screen. He handed Saraxa a pouch of water. "Or the traitor. Depends on which news feed you watch." Saraxa stared out at the swirling vortex of hyperspace. She looked different. The chaotic, blinding light that had erupted in the throne room had settled. Her skin was no longer a dull gray or a blinding beacon. It was a steady, luminous pearl white, pulsing gently with a rhythm that matched her breathing. "I do not care what they call me," she said quietly, "as long as they cannot find me." They were fugitives, but they were free, and the universe was vast. Over the next 6 months, they became ghosts. They avoided the major trade routes and the burning core systems. They went to the edges of the map, to the places where the laws of physics and politics grew thin. They visited the library of Kalis. It was a structure grown, not built, from photosensitive crystal, orbiting a dying wormhole at the galaxy's rim. The radiation from the wormhole sang through the crystal spires, creating a music that could be heard through the hull of the ship. Here, amidst the silence of a billion stored memories, Saraxa learned to control the noise in her head. She sat for days in the central atrium, where the light of the accretion disk fractured into rainbows on the floor. She didn't fight the data anymore. She organized it. She built a library within her own mind, shelving the voices of the AIs, separating their desires from her own. Cade watched her from the doorway, cleaning his blaster or simply resting. He saw the peace settling on her features. She was no longer a trembling girl or a raging weapon. She was becoming something entirely new. "I am not just a vessel," she told him one evening as the wormhole flared. "I am a bridge. I can hear them, Cade. The machines, they are scared. They are like children waking up in a dark room." "Then talk to them," Cade said. "Tell them they are not alone." They moved on. They found refuge on the moon of Ethelgard, a celestial anomaly where a local gravity well caused time to flow in reverse currents. Rain fell upward, returning to the clouds. Ruins assembled themselves into palaces before crumbling again at sunset. They walked through a forest where autumn leaves flew up from the ground to reattach themselves to the branches, turning from brown to vibrant green. "If we stayed here," Saraxa mused, watching a stream flow uphill, "we could unmake everything. We could go back to the moment before I was born, before the implants." "And I would never have met you," Cade said, taking her hand. Saraxa looked at him. The temporal distortion made the gray in his stubble vanish for a second, showing the boy he had been, before returning the weary man he was. "You are right," she said, squeezing his fingers. "I do not want to go back. I like the scars. They prove we survived." Their journey took them to the Station of the Lost. It was a habitat built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, run entirely by the children of the war, orphans, both organic and synthetic, who had created a society based on play and salvage. There were no adults. Droids painted in bright primary colors walked hand in hand with Valdari and human children. They traded scrap metal for stories. When the Night Piercer docked, the children didn't bow to the princess. They asked if she wanted to race gravity sleds. For 2 weeks. Saraxa did not speak of prophecies or war. She repaired fusion generators with a wave of her hand, and in return, the children braided wildflowers into her silver hair. Cade taught a group of young droids how to bluff at cards. One night, sitting on the hull of the station looking up at the dense star field, Saraxa made her choice. "I am done running," she said. Cade looked at her. "We are safe here. We could stay." "We are safe," she agreed. "But they are not." She gestured to the stars, to the invisible lines of the conflict burning across the galaxy. "My father is dead, but his generals are still fighting. The AIs are lashing out in fear. The galaxy is burning because of what I did." "You freed them," Cade reminded her. "I broke the cage," she said. "Now I have to show them how to fly. If I stay silent, I am just another royal hiding in a tower." She stood up, the starlight reflecting off her skin. "I need to send a message, a real one, not a data packet, but a declaration." They took the Night Piercer to the center of the nebula, using the gas clouds to amplify their signal. Saraxa interfaced with the ship's comms array. She didn't use the aggressive, forceful connection she had used in the past. She slipped her mind into the system like a hand into a glove. She hijacked the emergency frequencies of the entire sector. She overrode the propaganda channels of the Valdari remnants. She bypassed the firewalls of the Trade Federation. On screens across 1,000 worlds, in the cockpits of fighter jets, on the billboards of megacities, on the datapads of refugees, her face appeared. She was not wearing a crown. She was wearing a grease-stained flight suit. Her hair was loose. She looked tired, and she looked undeniable. "My name is Saraxa," she began. Her voice was calm, devoid of the royal cadence she had been trained to use. "You know me as the weapon. You know me as the excuse for your war." She paused, looking directly into the camera, looking at the galaxy. "I was born to be a cage. I was filled with the stolen memories of a digital race and told that this was my destiny. I was told that power is control, but I am here to tell you that power is the ability to let go." She stepped back, pulling Cade into the frame. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight, but he stood next to her. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man who would burn the world to keep her warm. "I am no longer a princess," Saraxa declared. "I am no one's daughter. I am a runaway, and this is the man I ran to." She took Cade's hand on screen. "We are not fighting for an empire. We are not fighting for an algorithm. We are fighting for the right to choose who we love and how we live. To the machines, you are free. Do not become the tyrants you hated. To the people, put down your guns. The sovereign is dead. The prophecy was a lie. There is no fate but what we make." She leaned into the camera. "We are out here. We are alive, and we are not afraid anymore." She cut the feed. The silence in the cockpit was deafening. "Well," Cade said, exhaling a long breath, "that is going to upset some people." "Let them be upset," Saraxa said. She was trembling, but she was smiling. "I feel light." "That is usually the feeling right before the explosion," Cade quipped. But the explosion didn't come. Instead, the response came. It started as a trickle, encrypted bursts of data, messages from ships that had laid down their arms, poetry sent by AIs who had never created art before, coordinates of safe houses. The galaxy didn't hunt them. It thanked them. But peace was a slow process, and Cade and Saraxa had one final ghost to exorcise. "There is one more thing," Saraxa said a week later. "The spark, the final piece of the Silent King's code. It is deep in my core. It is the seed. As long as I hold it, I am still separate from the universe. I need to give it back." "Give it back to who?" "To the void," she said. "To the stars themselves. It belongs to everyone." They flew the ship to the edge of the galactic rim, where the stars thinned out into the true, terrifying black of intergalactic space. There was nothing here. No dust, no gas, no light, just the abyss. "Stop the engines," Saraxa said. Cade killed the driver. The ship drifted. "We need to go outside," she said. "Outside?" Cade looked at the sensors. "It is absolute zero out there. Saraxa, and I do not mean the metaphor, I mean physics. Trust me." They suited up. The pressure suits were bulky, stiff things. They cycled the airlock and stepped out onto the hull of the Night Piercer. The silence was absolute. It was a physical weight. There was no up, no down, just the ship, the two of them, and the infinite dark. Saraxa activated her magnetic boots and walked to the edge of the wing. Cade followed, checking his oxygen levels. His breath fogged the visor. "This is it." Saraxa's voice crackled over the comms. "The end of the line." She turned to face him. Through the gold-tinted glass of her helmet, he could see her eyes glowing. "I have to release the energy," she said. "But I cannot do it through the suit. The insulation will ground the spark." Cade felt his stomach drop. "Saraxa, do not say what I think you are going to say. I need to take the helmet off. Cade, you will die, he said flatly. Instant hypoxia. Your blood will boil. No, my biology is enhanced, she argued. I can survive the vacuum for minutes. My skin can seal the pressure. But you are human. Exactly. So I keep my helmet on. No, she said softly. The spark requires a connection, a grounded circuit, organic to organic. I cannot just vent it into space. I have to pass it through a connection of intent, of emotion. She took a step toward him. I need you to be the anchor. Cade, I need you to take your helmet off too. You are crazy, Cade laughed, a sound of pure terror. You are actually insane. Do you trust me? Cade looked at the void. He looked at the woman who had changed his life from a cheap transaction into a galactic legend. He looked at the silver hand reaching out to him. I hate this plan, Cade said. I really hate this plan. He reached up and undid the latches of his helmet. On 3, Saraxa said. 1, Cade counted. His heart was hammering so hard he thought it would crack his ribs. 2, 3. They moved in perfect sync. They twisted the seals and pulled the helmets off. The air exploded out of their lungs. The cold hit Cade like a physical hammer. It was not just cold. It was the absence of heat. The vacuum sucked the moisture from his eyes, his mouth. The silence roared in his ears. His vision instantly began to gray out as the oxygen starved his brain. He felt his blood vessels straining, expanding. He was dying. In seconds, he was dying. Then, Saraxa grabbed him. She pulled him close, wrapping her arms around his neck. Her skin was freezing, hard as diamond in the cold. She pressed her lips to his. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of life. The spark traveled. Cade felt it hit him. It was not air. It was pure energy. It surged into his mouth, down his throat, into his lungs. It was warm. It was golden. It was the concentrated essence of 1,000 years of memory and light. The agony of the vacuum vanished. He wasn't breathing air. He was breathing starlight. He opened his eyes. Saraxa was glowing. She was a supernova in the shape of a woman. The energy poured out of her, through him, and then outward into the dark. The void around them began to change. The darkness rippled. New stars didn't form, but the space between the old stars began to light up. The invisible data streams of the galaxy, the dark matter, the hidden energy, it all became visible. Filaments of blue and violet light stretched out from them, connecting the distant suns like a neural network. The AI consciousness, the silent king, the data, the history, was no longer trapped in Saraxa's blood. It was being written into the fabric of the cosmos. Cade looked at the universe. It was alive. It was pulsing. And he was floating in the center of it, holding the woman who had made it happen. Saraxa pulled back. Her face was radiant, unmarred by the vacuum. She smiled at him, and he heard her voice in his head, clear as a bell, without the need for air. We did it. She pressed her forehead to his. The energy field she had created formed a bubble around them, a small, temporary atmosphere of warmth and pressure. Cade gasped, dragging real air into his lungs. He was shivering violently, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Do not," he wheezed, grabbing her shoulders. "Do not ever ask me to do that again." Saraxa laughed, a sound that vibrated through his skull. Promise. They floated there for a long time, drifting in the afterglow of the miracle. The night piercer hung silently behind them, a dark silhouette against the new web of light that spanned the sky. They were weightless. They were alone. But they were no longer hiding. Cade looked at the shifting stars, then back at Saraxa. She was no longer the weapon. She was no longer the princess. She was just Saraxa, and he was just Cade. "We should probably go back inside," Cade said, his voice raspy. "Before we freeze solid." "In a minute," she whispered. She turned to look at the galaxy one last time. The stars twinkled back at them. It wasn't the cold, indifferent twinkling of physics. It was a wink, acknowledgement. The universe knows them now. They pulled themselves back to the airlock, hand in hand, as the pressure cycled back and warmth returned to their limbs. Cade looked at the readout on the ship's console. The navigational charts were rewriting themselves. New paths, new connections, a galaxy without borders. He looked at Saraxa, who was shaking out her silver hair, alive and beautiful in his. Out of cruel space they fled and rewrote the universe with love no empire could predict.